This is a program hosted by the Northwest Village Network, and tonight's topic is the best strategies for preventing gun violence. And our speaker is Mr. Keiland Henderson. And before I introduce him, since many of you are not familiar with NVN, I'm just going to explain that we are a volunteer organization of seniors in the Northwest section of Philadelphia. And our goal is to help people to age in place through activities and assistance and staying active. And so we have about 150 members. And if you are interested in checking us out, we can put our address in the chat, or maybe somebody has, and you can just Google NVN or Northwest Village, Philadelphia. So thank you for joining us. I want to introduce Mr. Keiland Henderson. He's with the National Institute of Criminal Justice Reform, and they consult with cities and nonprofits around the country on many criminal justice topics and challenges, including gun violence reduction. And so Mr. Henderson is the Institute's Violence Reduction Program Manager. And before he was with the Institute, he was with the city of Stockton with their Office of Violence Prevention when they implemented their violence reduction strategy. And he's also been a violence interrupter and outreach supervisor. So tonight, Mr. Henderson is going to share with us what he and the Institute have determined to be the most effective gun violence strategies. So, Mr. Henderson, thank you for sharing your time and your expertise with us tonight. We're so pleased to have you.
No, and thank you, Helene and others for this opportunity. It's a great opportunity. So we are so excited to be able to talk about our work and to have a really good conversation with you all about what's happening in our nation, as well as some strategies and recommendations that our organization puts forth every day. Again, my name is Keiland Henderson, Gun Violence Reduction Program Manager for the National Institute for Criminal Justice Reform, or also called NICJR, NICJR for some. And, some of you may have kind of heard about our organization either by podcast, where our executive director frequently speaks. And by the way, we are led by our executive director, David Muhammad, which I failed to mention, and he often speaks about, the work that we do in these podcasts, or you may have also maybe read some of our publications and reports that we've released over the years. But I want to quickly just kind of lay out the organization and our sort of the way we function. Really, we have two arms, two key areas, and one is criminal justice reform, of course, and the other is the gun violence reduction strategy, or gun violence reduction and the strategies that we recommend. Really, our criminal justice reform sort of arm includes research, advocacy, and technical assistance, including those publications and reports, where we advocate for fair criminal justice practices and policy development. And, also our team identifies opportunities and recommendations for reforms, and we offer these recommendations to cities and jurisdictions and elected officials and city managers and mayors, those folks who are responsible for ensuring that public safety is seen and felt in their respective cities. On our gun violence reduction side, we support cities and jurisdictions to actually implement these gun violence reduction strategies that would aid in those cities really seeing and realizing at least a 10% reduction in gun violence after implementation is done right. So, we have our recommendations, and we really believe that if cities would implement those strategies correctly, that they can see at minimum 10% reductions every year. My personal background, Helene spoke a little bit about my work as a violence interrupter. I started off as a violence interrupter in the city of Stockton, which is where I'm located now, where I reside, which is probably about an hour and a half south of Oakland, California, which is where our headquarters is. I started off as a violence interrupter, not really knowing this field of work existed, but sort of being prompted by my personal experiences being the oldest of 8 siblings, having a lot of responsibility and sort of being my brother's keeper from a young age, to really mentoring a lot of young people throughout the years. And, you know, Stockton in 2012 was considered the murder capital of California. And I came in at around 2015. And again, started as a violence interrupter and then became an outreach supervisor, supervising a team of violence interrupters and outreach workers. Then did some community engagement, where it wasn't just, you know, community engagement as we know it to be, but it was community engagement focused on still reducing gun violence by 10%. So we, you know, really were asking ourselves the question, how do we sort of design and implement community engagement strategies and events that would aid in the reduction of violence, as opposed to just doing these events, promoting sort of, you know, resources that are available to communities. And then before leaving there, going to NICJR, I co-managed the Office of Violence Prevention, and now I'm here with NICJR. I wanted to first start off just kind of thinking about, you know, how we sort of define the term violence, right? Because I think, as I think about violence, and as I think, you know, most sectors and fields think and use the term violence, we only define it by one way, as opposed to the multiple definitions that apply to the term violence, right? We define violence as this physical act of force against another. And that is certainly the definition or a definition of violence. But we often forget the other definitions that include, right, an instance of violent treatment or procedure, right? And so I think we often forget the structural violence that communities have experienced, you know, throughout the lifetime, or the sort of, at least the foundation of this country. Black and brown populations and communities have experienced the structural violence for a very long time, right? You know, disenfranchisement, disinvestment, you know, redlining, you know, I can go on and on. And, you know, as we sort of use data to inform us about gun violence in particular, we know that violence is concentrated in areas of poverty, and it is also concentrated in areas where there's other violence. And so violence breeds violence. And so you have to think about, right, like, how did we get here? And you have to consider, as we talk about this national issue and national problem, you have to consider what got us to this point. And of course, also, how can we come up with strategies to resolve the challenges and issues that we face so that we don't continue in this path. And so wanted to just kind of ground us in that. And so our work as we go across the country and engage with cities and jurisdictions is really to, first of all, inform various cities that those who are driving gun violence in particular are usually most often less than 1% of the overall population of that city, right? And so we say that because, you know, first of all, it puts it in perspective that it's just not everybody who's doing this, but because we can sort of quantify the number of folks that are driving gun violence, to us, it means that we can sort of wrap our arms around it. And it says that we can sort of get in front of it. That's one. The other thing that we want to highlight and uplift in every jurisdiction is the fact that because we recognize what sort of prompted, created, or started gun violence in our country, then we want to also recognize what will stop or reduce violence. And for us, we believe there are a number of things that would do that. One, or first and foremost, is providing these services, supports, and opportunities, right, or investing in other people, right, so that they can, in fact, change the course of their life. and have and produce better outcomes. The other thing is, which kind of goes in line with our criminal justice reform sort of arm of our work, is that we recognize that, right, police and public safety, as we know it, and how it relates to law enforcement practices, certainly have their role in all of this, right? But we advocate that there needs to be focused enforcement focused on the right people in the right way. And we actually believe that if you do that, you can actually reduce the footprint of law enforcement while at the same time simultaneously increasing public safety, right? And that, to some is a novel idea, because you still have those with this idea that law enforcement and an increase in law enforcement is all you need. Well, when you ask law enforcement, they will tell you, we know we can't arrest ourselves out of this situation. And it takes other people, other organizations, right, other strategies to implement to actively reduce violence. And so one of those sort of groups of people is in fact the community. It's you and I. It's everyday folks who we need to inform us continuously on what works, right? It is the folks that are most impacted. It is the folks that are credible messengers. We use the term credible messengers all the time as it relates to frontline staff or boots on the ground folks engaging with high-risk individuals. But these credible messengers are individuals who can inform us how we should go about performing our work in these respective communities. For example, you guys are all in Philadelphia, right? We have some key fundamental sort of elements of the strategy that we recommend, but Philadelphia has to certainly figure out what's going to work for Philadelphia. Same thing in Austin or Stockton or Oakland, right? And so we certainly promote that. I want to kind of divert a little bit and go to exactly what our work looks like in these cities. And so we certainly provide technical assistance to elected officials and policy folks and, directors and managers of the strategy, but we also go in and provide direct training to frontline staff. So we have life coaching training, outreach worker training, training folks on how to engage with high-risk individuals. By the way, when we use the term high risk, we're talking about those who are at the highest risk of being a victim or perpetrator of gun violence, right? And so we work with both. And by the way, an individual can be both, right? Victim and or perpetrator of gun violence. But we go in and we say, listen, here are the services and supports they need, right? And we have this cycle that we talk about, which starts with being informed by data, right? And it really is having this gun violence problem analysis that we're trying to complete in the city of Philadelphia right now, actually, where we analyze at least a year of all homicides that have occurred by gun violence, and at least 2 years of all non-fatal injury shootings. By that, we come up with these risk factors that will let us know what a high-risk individual looks like. Are they Black? Are they brown? Are they, right, 18 to 25, 35, 45? What's the age range? How many sort of criminal justice sort of touches have they had, whether they were arrested or being pulled over or whatnot? Other things like, have they been shot before? Do they have close friends or family? But we come up with these risk factors and we provide this to the city to say, hey, here is a way for you to focus on the right people, right? The second thing is you want an ongoing sort of data-informed meeting where individuals who are part of this strategy come together on a weekly basis and look at each incident of gun violence that has happened within the last 7 days. And these individuals are then referred to the OVP of the city, right? Whatever they're called, OVP, Office of Neighborhood Safety, Violence Prevention. And that office coordinates a team of street-level outreach workers who then engage with these folks. They engage with them by using their own personal testimonies to say how they have been there, how they have, experienced living the life, but they've changed their life and they now live a more positive lifestyle, and they can do it too. But then they also have these services, supports, and opportunities for these individuals. It may be a job. It may be helping them get their birth certificate, license, ID. It may be housing, mental health, substance use classes, anger management, whatever. But it is really services and resources that we pour back into the community that need it the most, right? And so that is the strategy that we recommend. That is the strategy that we help implement, and that's the strategy that we feel, if cities implement in the right way, can really see reductions of at least 10% or more on an annual basis. I will stop there. I have a lot more to say, but I want to pause and ask if there are any questions based on everything I laid out. And then I can also go into greater detail about what that strategy looks like.
So when you look at a violence event, say one of the violence events that took place in the previous 7 days, who is it you reach out to? It's to the victim, or how does that process happen?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. That's a really good question. And so, we really, depending on the situation, we will reach out to both the victim and the perpetrator, right? And so we often have both on our caseload. And so it really depends. As a supervisor, I will say that if a victim was rushed to the hospital, then I would dispatch outreach workers and life coaches and credible messengers to the hospital, right? The purpose is to engage the family, to provide resources to the family as well as the individual once he or she is released from the hospital. But it is also to take advantage of what we call the golden hour where someone is more apt to make a change in their lifestyle because they were recently injured or at least shot at. And they're open to considering another lifestyle. And so we're there sometimes at the bedside to suggest to the person that if they want to make a change, we can show them how to realize that and how to see that happen. If it is the perpetrator, we know who that is. It really depends. Some cities would prefer that outreach workers disengage with the perpetrator if they know that there is a likely arrest to occur. Other cities, it's free game. And the reason why is because oftentimes perpetrators are not immediately arrested, and they continue to perpetrate. And so if that's happening, you want them to be able to work with an individual, whether they're going to be arrested or not, so that they can no longer continue to shoot at people or shoot others. And so it depends, but we typically will work with both. And that's kind of the long answer. But it is all based on the coordination of that office who dispatches those outreach workers, again, to work with those individuals.
Thanks very much.
Yes, sir. And I think Ms. Clark has a question.
Yeah, when I read about what happened in Oakland that was successful, it seemed that they found men in their 30s who somehow were most at risk. And I wondered, in Philadelphia, there's so many very young people at school or walking home from school or at games. And I wonder if it's the same situation as it was in Oakland.
That's a really good question too, Linda, because, we talk about the importance in distinguishing intervention work versus prevention work, right? And, we define prevention work as, really good work. Primarily, most oftentimes, it's working with at-risk youth. But the results are long-term, right? You're talking about 5 to 10 years off, as opposed to intervention, which is near-term results. And so, we inform cities, like, if you really want to see reductions happen, you have to have intervention efforts that are sort of deployed and used to reduce violence. I have a slide I want to pull up, but usually when we complete a gun violence problem analysis or this assessment in each city, it tells us the average age of the victim and the perpetrator. And what you're referring to is what we see across the board. Most times, the victim is in their 30s and the perpetrator is in their mid-20s, around 24 to 26 years old, which goes against what we usually hear and read by the media, which suggests that most of this violence is happening and prompted by teens or young people, right? There certainly has been an uptick of violence with 14 to 16-year-olds since the pandemic. Primarily, it has actually been around carjackings, robberies, but gun violence by far, based on the data, is still shown to be driven by adults. And so I want to pull this up because it's a really great question, Linda. I want to pull this up just to my point about the difference between intervention and prevention. And I'm going to share my screen here really quick. But here's what we often present on, right? And just as I said, prevention is a long-term violence reduction strategy, like mentoring high-risk middle and high school students or CBT workshops, but it's a long-term investment, 5 to 10 years. And so you have a lot of organizations saying that we're reducing gun violence. We work to reduce gun violence. And we ask them, okay, well, what are your programs, right? And they said, well, we have great mentoring programs where they work with individuals who live the life. And it's like, great, but the population that you're serving is not the population driving gun violence today, right? Even community transformation, right? Transforming communities. So we look at blight and, we look at graffiti and we look at areas of high poverty. And it's like, that too will reduce gun violence, sure, in about 15 years, right? But if you're talking about reducing gun violence in the near term, it needs to be intervention efforts like conflict mediation, like street outreach, direct engagement with high risk, if you want to see reductions happen in the near term, which to us is 1 to 3 years. And so if there are no further questions at this point, I'd like to continue moving forward with the strategy. And I just have another slide to share. And it really just sort of captures everything that I laid out. But I do want to pull that up because I think it will capture everything a little bit better, visually speaking. And so let me pull that up here. Just give me one moment. I just lost my attachment here. Okay, here we go. All right, great. Share screen. And so this is what we call our cycle, our gun violence reduction cycle. And so as you can see here, everything really starts with our gun violence problem analysis, right? You don't want to shoot in the dark, right? And, let me stop here and pause and say that this is, for some, advocacy groups, it could be a bit concerning because they feel like this sort of generates a list of gang-involved individuals, and it does not. What it generates is these characteristics and risk factors that high-risk individuals often portray. And so really you do want as this ongoing data meeting happens, you do want a list of individuals that credible messengers can engage with, right? It's not a list that we sort of, push to be arrested. It's not a list of individuals that we push to be harassed, but it is a list for folks to know, who they should in fact engage with. And most oftentimes, these credible messengers and outreach workers already know, right? It's just a confirmation, because obviously their job is to keep their ear to the ground and know exactly who's driving the violence. This gun violence problem analysis informs the weekly shooting reviews. Shooting reviews are typically these meetings that are held amongst law enforcement partners, where they go over the incident again within the last 7 days. They talk about who was involved, right? They talk about who was associated with parties involved and who should receive services. And then if there was a list, right, of recommendations or referrals, that goes to the coordination meeting. These coordination meetings are then held by the local Office of Violence Prevention, right? It is called Office of Violence Prevention in Philadelphia. Again, it's called other things in other cities. But it is this office that is not led by law enforcement, but it is led by a local jurisdiction that coordinates this work. And I often call the OVP as a middleman between law enforcement and contractors, whether that is a community-based organization or individuals who do the front-facing work with these individuals, but they are the coordinators of that. And then those referrals are assigned to outreach teams. Now, we recommend outreach teams to be led by, again, community-based organizations and not be in-house with the city, right? But these are contracted organizations that have hired credible messengers, people with previous experience, former incarcerated individuals, those, again, who have the credibility in the community to engage with these individuals. We call them life coaches, credible messengers, or whomever. And their whole purpose is to build relationship, right? It is more than just service brokering, right? We don't, knock on the door of a high-risk person and say, "Hi, my name is Keiland, I want to offer you a job," right? This is, the field has evolved. And, you have, some of you may have, or may be familiar with sort of Pastor Boyle in Los Angeles, California, who, often would say that nothing stops a bullet greater than a job. And, he's had to later recant that and say, it is more than just a job, but it is also the relationship with these life coaches and outreach workers that would sort of influence a high-risk individual to make better decisions, which lead to better outcomes. And I will speak about that more, but when this individual is ready, they will connect them to services and supports, which may include employment, housing, et cetera, for individuals who refuse, right, to accept these services and supports, but continue in gun violence. Then unfortunately, you do have to impose law enforcement, again, that being focused enforcement. And lastly, to a previous conversation Helene and I were having, all of this has to be done continuously, right? Ensuring that, right, the goals are met, whether it is engaging with a certain amount of people, whether you want to target strategy-wise certain groups. We know that it is no longer just about quote unquote gangs, but it is groups, crews, neighborhood blocks, associations, loose associations, strong associations that drive gun violence, as well as just everyday interpersonal conflict, right? And so there has to be some type of performance management to ensure that this process is being done in the right way and with fidelity. I'll stop sharing there. And we'll talk quickly about more of the relationship building, and then I'll pause for more questions. We like to consider folks that are credible messengers as life coaches, and we have a training where we train them on what it means to be a life coach, which is different from service brokering, right? So if you ask me, what makes this whole strategy work? And what does credible messengers do that law enforcement or police can't do? And I would say it is the building of relationship, right, that creates, right, influence. Well, first of all, you certainly create trust between the high-risk individual and the credible messenger. But it builds influence that this credible messenger has with the high-risk individual. And with that influence, right, we encourage these credible messengers to support the individual in making better decisions. For example, when you have an individual, which happens often, call their credible messenger and say, I want to kill someone, right? And obviously they use a different set of words there. Oftentimes folks kind of freak out at that. But what we say is that that's what you want. Because if they're calling their credible messenger or life coach, then obviously the relationship is strong enough, right, to where they feel comfortable enough and have enough trust to be able to call this person before they make a bad decision. And the goal is for that life coach or credible messenger to have that influence to suggest to this individual that there is a better way, right? There's a better way to deal with your conflict, what's going on, what's happening. There's a better way to communicate. There's a better way to resolve this. Can you consider this? Can you consider that? And when those decisions are made, those good decisions, right, then in fact, better outcomes are realized. And then we use those outcomes to suggest to that person that this is a key indication that you have what it takes to change your life. You've done it before, you can do it again. Just like you made that decision, right? You were upset, you were heated, you wanted to pick up a gun, you wanted to shoot someone, but you decided not to, right? You can continue with that pattern of making better decisions. And if you do, I guarantee you that your life will change. And then we supplement that relationship and engagement with services and supports and opportunities. And then we come to them and say, here's an opportunity for a job. Some of these folks have never worked ever, but here's an opportunity with a good paying job. You'll be able to support your family, right? You'll be able to live in peace and not have to worry about law enforcement sort of, right, looking over your shoulder at all the times, thinking that you're going to be arrested here and there for illegal activity. Hey, man, here's peace. And we offer peace and we offer hope, right? So I would say that is our bread and butter. That is our theory of change, if you will, is to use relationships with high risk individuals to make better decisions. I'll pause there and see if there's any questions. Look like, and I don't know, Helene, hopefully I'm not overstepping in terms of facilitation, but I do see a question from Ruth. I don't know if you.
Yes, you can hear me.
Yes.
Yes, so if the key is to have a credible messenger speak to the perpetrator, my question is, how do you identify the credible messenger? And do you ever run short of numbers of credible messengers to attach to this program?
Yeah, that's an art in and of itself, right? Because, you know, listen, we're working with, you know, like the city of Austin, for example, who historically hasn't had issues with gang violence. But, you know, as with other cities across the country, have seen and experienced an uptick in gun violence recently, and they don't really have organizations in town that have done this work for a long time. And so they put out an RFP and only one organization applied, and that organization does not really have a long history of working with this population. And so the question becomes, right, like, how do they recruit, right? You know, who's out there? Yes, that is a challenge, but we certainly have figured out how to do that. First and foremost, we recommend implementing the strategy first after getting and securing community buy-in. So in the cities that we go in that have no strategy currently implemented, we say go out into the community and talk about the strategy that you want to implement. Get their buy-in, find out who are the influential people and persons in that city, whether it be faith leaders or just community leaders, and talk to them about what their strategy is. And through that relationship building, identify individuals in the community who are already credible messengers, right? Because this concept of credible, this concept is like, you know, you have a lot of training about, you know, or for credible messengers and et cetera. You know, it is my philosophy that you can't train anybody to be a credible messenger, right? Either you are credible or you aren't, right? And so to your point, Ruth, we have to identify those with that credibility. And we use community residents to help us identify those folks. We'll open up sessions like, for example, in Memphis, Tennessee, which of course, you know, a lot of, you know, just really tragic what recently happened. But we have been working with them for over 2 years now. And similarly, they were not aware of who in the city were credible messengers. So we had to do this sort of campaign where we informed the community about the work that was happening. And we opened it up after hours for anybody interested in the work to come and ask questions, right? And ask us any question you have. And we did that, and folks showed up and they said, I need a job, but I don't know what this is about. And through that, we start identifying folks who were already influential and already leaders in there. That's one way. But also I may add that, you know, one of the challenges is in cities that sort of not only coordinate, but also hire credible messengers, like for example, in the city of Stockton, right? They did not contract with a community-based organization to do the work. They actually had credible messengers, right, who were city employees. We don't recommend that. But if that is the case, then what we recommend is that the hiring practices be different for this line of work. You have to be open, right? And flexible to working with individuals that have criminal records, right? We understand that everyone, right, like, you know, for those who have, right, sexual charges or whatnot, may not be approved to be hired, but there should definitely be some flexibility, right?
Yeah, I have a question about that.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, are you saying that the credible messenger has to be the same skin color?
Well, what we're saying is that this credible messenger has to have credibility.
Are you saying that it has to do with skin color?
What I'm saying is that they have to have credibility. And when you are dealing with communities who are most impacted by gun violence, they are primarily Black and brown communities, whether victim or perpetrators. And most oftentimes, when there is a credible messenger who can speak to and advocate on behalf of the community that is most impacted, they wind up being Black and brown individuals.
If you look at the group in front of you, and I only see 2 Black people, does that mean that we are not credible messengers, most of us?
Well, you tell me, Ruth. Can you speak on behalf of the Black community in Philadelphia?
No.
Do you have credibility, right? Do they know who Ruth is?
No.
Okay. That's how we determine who's credible and who's not. It's not what we decide as who is credible. It's who the community says is credible.
Well, that really obviates all the other people in this group.
Well, that may be true when it comes down to being a credible messenger, but that is certainly not true when it comes down to doing your part in seeing gun violence reduced across the country, and particularly in your city, because there's many different ways that you can be involved in supporting this work. And one of the ways is being an advocate for the strategy that works. Another way is advocating for investment in this work, because this is a new and emerging field. I mean, listen, some would argue against that because they would say there have been credible messengers for 20 and 30 years. Very true. But when it comes to the government recognizing this as being a legitimate field, right, that's very new, as well as investors and philanthropies alike. And so that is a way for folks to get involved, is to suggest to investors and funders, and philanthropies to invest more funding in this work, because you have, for example, in the city of Stockton, only 8 credible messengers with a population of 350,000 people, right? And so again, with the gun violence problem analysis saying that less than 1%, there's around 85 people who are driving gun violence. There's no way only 8 people can engage with 285 folks. So you need more money, both private and government funding, to increase, right, the amount of impact this work can really have to reduce gun violence. And certainly,
are you looking for from this group to fund you?
Well, the National Institute is a nonprofit organization, and so we're always open to receiving funding. You can go on our website and there's information on how to do that. But we also re-grant to other nonprofit organizations, right? And so, for example, in Washington, D.C., in Baltimore, in Indianapolis, where we just, through our work over the course of the last year, that city was able to see and realize 17% of reductions in gun violence over the last year. We're so proud about that. We also re-grant to organizations who are doing this work, but certainly you have the option to donate to our organization, and we could also provide you information on other organizations that could certainly benefit from funding.
Okay, I just wanted to be clear that one of the goals with this group is not necessarily to have a venue for us to participate in change, unless we would participate in financial support of you. And I'm interested in the actual change part. I'm a licensed psychologist, and I am really opposed to the idea that because my skin color is different, that I can't be a valuable messenger. Right? I'm opposed to that idea.
And I certainly, I love that, and I respect that view. The reality is, though, despite you being opposed, the community will in fact inform you.
I think you're right. I think
right?
You're absolutely right.
Right. I would agree with you, right? Like I like to think that I would be able to go in to any community, being part of humanity as a whole. I have something that I could relate to, I think, with anybody, right? And I have personal experiences that I'm sure I could relate to despite one's race or ethnicity. But it's what the community says. And you have to keep in mind too, Ruth, is that we are talking about Black and brown communities that we talked about starting off that have been disenfranchised, disinvested, and do not have trust, right? Yeah. With not just the police department, but do not have trust with a lot of racists, because to them, a white person, right, to them symbolizes the community of people that in fact perpetrated this structural racism, literal racism, and actually even physical violence, right, that they experience for some people each and every day.
Yeah. I think that you're describing this kind of cultural racism that's endemic in our country, and how to change that is a much bigger question.
Very much so, and I think that is also part of our work, is how do we build police and community trust? How do we change the narrative around what public safety is? Because the reality is, Ruth, and I love what you just said, in terms of our culture, and there are some aspects of our culture that really the narrative needs to be changed, because like we say that folks do not trust law enforcement, but if, right, things happen in our community, we call 911. We do, right? We do. And so there's this narrative change that needs to happen around what does public safety really look like, and who can actually offer us support and for our community, so that we feel and experience more safety.
I think it has to be.
I have a question. May I ask a question now? I'd like to ask a question about the credible messengers and the kind of support they must need. I think that it must be very stressful and sometimes dangerous.
Well, it's very stressful, and it's always dangerous. Thank you for that question. You know, you had 2 credible messengers who were murdered last year in Baltimore. You had 2 others who were murdered in other cities across the country. It is a very dangerous job. Our individuals, again, are the very highest risk. And a lot of times, individuals that we wind up working with already have what they call a green light, right? Communities know that to mean that if an opposing group or individual see them out and about in the community, then they will instantly try to kill this person, right? And, you know, can you imagine what that may be like in terms of safety concerns with this individual working with a credible messenger, right? Oftentimes, even me in my personal experience, we have had to meet with individuals behind a building. We have had to have multiple credible messengers follow us and tell us to ensure that no one else was following us. Very dangerous job. They need a lot of support. I'm so grateful that I have firsthand experience being a violence interrupter. So I know how challenging it is. One of the biggest challenges is maintaining our wellness and practicing self-care and our mental health. Because oftentimes clients we work with are murdered, those who are active on our caseloads. We meet with them one day and the next day they're gone. Oftentimes we attend funerals. You have individuals, as I said before, who call us and tell us that they want to kill someone, and there is a imminent danger towards someone else. And how do we stop this person from killing someone else, right? Without most times the support of law enforcement. I say most times because there are some times that we, you know, just call upon law enforcement to assist us, like if we know that there's going to be a shootout in the area and we've done everything we can to mediate this conflict and we just are not successful. We may ask for law enforcement to have a patrolman ride by at a certain area at a certain time, right? But most oftentimes it's just us mediating this conflict. So there's a lot of support needed there. One of the things you will see in this field that's happening now is we're using therapists and clinicians to support our team, to come and visit us regularly, to offer sessions with frontline staff, or some offices have even hired in-house clinicians to support our staff in this work. It's very challenging work, absolutely.
Keiland, we have a few hands raised on Zoom. Can you see them?
I think, yes, I think, I'm not sure if Mr. Clemens or Gail was first, but I'll just go to the first person to my left.
I just wanted to make sure you could see, yes.
Yes, thank you, which happens to be Mr. Michael Clemens, please.
Hi, how are you?
Great.
So what I hear you saying, in answer to the one woman's question about whether she could participate as a trusted messenger. It seems to me is you just mentioned support. And it seems to me that the trusted messenger is only the point person. And there should be a group of people that work behind that trusted messenger to provide them with the resources that they need in order to be able to do their job. So if they're trying to find jobs for people, for example, if they're trying to find professional support, if they're trying to find money, the trusted messenger doesn't have the time to do that and be the point person with the clients. And it seems to me that other people like ourselves could participate in that part of the effort. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense, and you're absolutely spot on.
Does it work that way?
It does. You're spot on. It's a network of support, right? It is, you know, in some offices you'll see this network show up to those coordination meetings where, you know, you are talking about an individual who is currently being engaged with the credible messenger, and service providers are also at the table. And, you know, we bring up these cases to say, like, for example, this individual I've been working with for 3 months, and, you know, he has a record, and, you know, unfortunately he could not get hired. And, you know, we're looking for a job, you know, for this person. Does anybody have, right, like an opportunity for him to get work? And these service providers, these individuals at the table come with this support that can offer that to them. So yes, and it's so many different ways that one can support outside of being a credible messenger, right? You're absolutely right, but it is also housing. It is, I mean, which is a challenging issue across the nation right now. I mean, like, you have to be a high-risk person to be challenged in housing right now. Like, it's crazy.
So Ruth mentioned that she's a licensed psychologist, and I would think there would be a role for her or someone with her types of credentials to be able to provide support to the.
Yeah, I mean, I would say reach out to the local, you know, an example is, you know, of something, you know, everyone could do really, is to reach out to the local OVP office in Philadelphia, especially as a licensed therapist, to, you know, maybe offer volunteer sessions for credible messengers or clients.
Right.
How can you partner with the OVP? That happens time and time again. It's happened here in the state of California. We have a state violence intervention and prevention funding called the CalVIP funding. And the city of Stockton has just contracted with a local therapist, right, to come in regularly and provide these, offer these sessions with both clients and credible messengers. Absolutely.
Okay, Keiland, in the interest of time, let's see. I think Gail has a question. I don't know if others do, but probably we should switch to question and answer mode now. Are there any last closing comments you want to make as part of your presentation before we go to questions?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I think I wanted this to be conversational and not just really me just, you know, speaking at you all. And so, you know, I think, you know, some other things that I'll add is just the fact that I think, you know, listen, you know, maybe, I mean, we all know this, and maybe it doesn't need to be said, but I don't want to assume. But I think I started off by talking about how we define violence and, you know, really kind of looking at the communities that are most impacted by violence. The reason why I started off with saying that is because I think as we look at what's happening in our country, we're at a point where, you know, no one can continue to turn sort of a blind eye towards this issue, this challenge. It's going to take everybody, right? One of the challenges we see in the city of Philadelphia that we're currently working in to help support them on their strategy is the fact that, you know, it's resource rich, when we say resource rich and coordination poor, right? And there needs to be better alignment with those in this field of work working to reduce gun violence, better coordination, more accountability with those who are tasked with managing and directing these offices to see reductions. But I think in addition to that, it's going to take everybody, including everybody on this call, right? It's going to take education institutions. It's going to take faith-based organizations. It's going to take the everyday resident who is fearful of calling the police because they're afraid of retaliation, or, you know, they have credibility and they can really speak to a high-risk individual about change. It's going to take everyone, I think, to really tackle this problem. And so I appreciate this opportunity to speak about what we think is currently what works, right? But I would also say that we need to remain open, right? As we continually are informed about, you know, the data, with the data, about who we should engage and how we should engage with this person. We should remain open. And I'll end with this. Oftentimes when an individual is a perpetrator of gun violence, we say that they should get what's coming to them, right? They should be responsible for their life, and they need to take accountability for their actions, right? And, you know, we talk about mercy in the court, right? Sometimes a judge can actively use that, right? And if there's no sort of minimum sentencing, right, you know, they can look at family and connections, and, you know, on one hand, they could have gave an individual 5 years, but instead they show mercy, right? And they give this person 2 to 3 years with 2 to 3 years of probation, right? That's mercy of the court. But I want to suggest that in addition to mercy, we need grace. And grace is fairly different from mercy, because grace is giving somebody something that they don't deserve, right? And so as we think about folks who commit violence across the country, we often feel like they don't deserve anything but jail time or this penalty. But I actually would suggest that they need way more than that. And they need grace. They need things that we can provide them that maybe they don't deserve it, because in fact, we are all adults for the most part. And, you know, we make our own decisions and there are consequences to our decisions. But I think that we need to show a little bit more grace and give them more in terms of resources and support and provide services to them, so that in fact, they can, while changing their life and changing the course of their life, be given tools to ensure that they continue to make better decisions and that they don't continue to rely upon guns and weapons as a means, right, to deal with their current challenges. And so I just want to offer that. And with that, I'll open it up for additional questions.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's let Gail have the first shot because she's been waiting patiently.
That's okay.
Thanks,
I think, Patricia, you had your hand up for a long time, so
Oh,
I think
I'm
you were
sorry.
before me. Go ahead,
Sorry.
Patricia.
I'm sorry, I did not see.
I'm sorry. No, I had put my hand down. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
Gail.
Okay.
All right.
If we have time during the questions, I will ask. Why don't you go ahead and then I'll go, okay? Because you've had your hand
Sure.
up for a while too.
Okay, sorry, I'm having some trouble with my video, but I wanted to thank you, Keiland, and thank you, Helene, for bringing this conversation. I think one of the most important things is hearing about what are some solutions to this problem that is just so horrific and horrible. And a lot of times people just lose faith and they, think more police are just the answer. So to really have a full discussion about what are the answers here that we can put into place and what is the hope for change because of this. And I think it's very important in this year when we're voting for a new mayor and we're voting for new council people to really make them hear this message also. There's plenty of work to be done. I wasn't here to kind of have a commercial for Power Live Free, but there is plenty of opportunity for getting involved. We're not a direct service group, but there is a lot to be done. And the thing I was thinking of when I first put my hand up was if you could say a little bit, Keiland, about how social media is really driving some of this violence, and maybe what specifically might be some, solutions to the problems that are happening now because of social media.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot, and I'll make these answers a lot shorter now that we're in our officially Q&A session. But yeah, absolutely, we see that a lot. It is happening more often than not in terms of social media being sort of this platform folks use to drive violence. Especially among the younger population. By younger, I'm talking about still adults 18 and up, but 18 to sort of 24 year age folks. We see it oftentimes with even sort of secret messages, using emojis to both threaten opposing groups and individuals, to also perpetuate ongoing conflict, right? We also see it in ways where folks get online and go on live, whether they don't really use Facebook Live anymore, it's more so Instagram. And there's another one that is escaping me. It's escaping me. But they use that to where they go into different hoods and communities, neighborhoods, and let folks know that they're in that neighborhood, and that's an opposing group and stuff. And so there, yes, I think what we can do and what we have been doing is suggest that our credible messengers be more engaged online. We have been training organizations to start those official trainings for credible messengers. How do you recognize threatening memes and emojis, right? How do you recognize these messages and cues from one person to another? The other thing is to engage with folks via social media. Sometimes we cannot get through when we're trying to start the engagement. They don't answer the phone, they don't answer the door, but they're online. And how does that engagement look like? So we're working on those things.
Thank you, Keiland. I think we have a question here in the chat. I think we should aim for about an 8:15 wind up. Is that right, Myra? Would you concur? Yes, so we'll shoot for about 8:15. So there's one question on here. There's a movement called restorative justice. Is your institute influenced by that?
So yes, I mean, it is, this whole idea of a mercy, right, and culpability is really kind of like what restorative justice is, actually. And so we don't have any direct trainings around restorative justice. However, me, myself, I have several agreements and partnerships with organizations where I provide restorative justice trainings, right? So in San Joaquin County, where the city of Stockton is, I have a contract with the district attorney's office where we provide restorative justice techniques to post-plea individuals who put a plea in, primarily around domestic violence and high-risk gun violence and other challenges as well. But it is bringing these parties who are in opposition together and having this conversation about and around the harm that was caused on both sides, and really kind of coming to a resolve around how can we repair the harm. So not for NICJR per se, although in theory, I guess, and philosophically, we certainly align with restorative justice practices.
Okay, Keiland, I want to inject a question that I have, and that is, when I heard you speak before, you talked about getting to the hospitals with programs that help to prevent revenge shootings. Does that still show up in your data as a high risk reason someone would commit gun violence is out of revenge for having been shot or someone in their family being shot?
Absolutely. I mean, and that may be something that I missed because, obviously when law enforcement respond, it's after something has taken place. The question is, how do you get in front of these
see.
acts, right?
I
And
see,
we
yeah.
know by data that once a violent act has occurred, 4 preceding acts can follow, retaliatory acts can follow.
I see,
And so,
yeah.
yes, when an incident has taken place, it is responding to the hospital or the neighborhood, but primarily it is to engage the family and the individual, if he or she survived that act, to ensure that preceding retaliation doesn't occur. It's critical, super critical in the line of work we do. And it is how we see our reductions, because law enforcement has their clearance rate, right? How to, what's the rate at which they arrest folks after they've committed an incident. But for us, it is reducing violence based on mediating conflicts before they happen, right? And oftentimes people ask us, how do you quantify what doesn't happen? And it is by those mediations, because if it had not been for a mediation, up to 4 retaliatory acts would have transpired.
Oh, interesting. All right. We've really got to go. Steve has a question, and I think there are several in the chat. Steve, hang on. Let me ask one of these, and then we'll get to you, and then we've got to go, I think. I believe that the police department and city manager's office think they are doing step 1 and 2, I'm guessing, of your cycle. Identifying people at risk and reviewing every week. Are there just not enough coaches, not enough training of them? Where do we drop the loop?
So our current contract with the city of Philadelphia is in fact to analyze and assess the current practices with OVP and law enforcement. And after we conclude or finish that, we are going to provide a set of recommendations for them to improve those current processes.
Finish the circle. All right, let's let Steve ask his question. Steve?
Well, it's more a suggestion. There are 2 groups here in Germantown, which is the most violent plague part of our NVN world, where I live. One's called Emir Healing Center. Every Murderer is Real. This is a group that just addresses one piece of your cycle, but offers counseling and support for families who are the survivors of shootings or the victim itself if they survive. It's been around about 25 years. A wonderful group, now serves the whole city. But there's a place anybody wants to help financially with that kind of counseling tomorrow. Just look up Emir Healing Center. The other is a group called Men Who Care of Germantown, who they hope, pre-incident intervention in the schools through a series of programs called Real Talk and some summer programs. We hope to have a speaker come to NVN or 2 speakers from Men Who Care of Germantown later this winter or spring. So you can find out more about their programs. But there are a lot of community-based groups working on pieces of your cycle. I don't know of anyone who's taking on that whole. It's a big lift to make that cycle work and to keep it up month after month and year.
But even Stephen, if I could just add really quick, I mean, that you're right. It's not. I mean, there's a big lift for one organization or agency, but the coordination needs to be there. And Helene talked about the last time I kind of met with another group of folks in Philadelphia. My suggestion was that there needs to be these spaces. One, where everybody knows what everyone is doing, like who's doing what and who does it well. And, come together regularly to discuss the work that's happening. And like you said, identify what pieces that, there may be a gap in, like, if there's something's not happening, who can take on that piece of work?
Thank you. Thanks to everyone for your attention tonight, and I hope we got your questions answered.
I think I see, Helene, not to cut you off, I think I see one more. Someone asked if NICJR is working with Ceasefire Philadelphia. I think their motto is the gun violence reduction strategy is almost identical to Ceasefire.
Thank you.
We don't call it Ceasefire though, because depending on who you ask, they have a different definition for Ceasefire. So we just wanted to kind of steer away from that name altogether, but essentially it is the same. It is the 4-step process that I laid out.
Thank you. Thank you for catching that. Sorry, Mary. Yeah, I missed your question. Okay, well, thank you so much. And Keiland's a busy guy, and I am so grateful to him for staying in communication with me and and being with us tonight during a very busy time for them. So thank you very much. And if you have further questions, you can send them and we can have Live Free help get answers as well. Thank you.
And I'm also throwing my email in the chat. Feel free to email me
Oh,
at any time.
aren't
It may
you
take a
nice?
while for me to respond, but I will certainly get to it. Thank you guys so much for this opportunity. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank
so
you,
much.
Thank you. Thank you, Keiland.
Take care.
Good night.
Thanks so much.